everyone. I'm Jesse Waters, and this is The Five. We're awaiting live remarks from President Donald Trump delivering a speech aboard the USS Intrepid aircraft carrier commemorating a major World War II battle. Let's go straight to Fox News Chief White House correspondent John Roberts, who's on the scene. So, John, the Australian Prime Minister and President Trump kind of had a little backstory. I think their conversation was leaked to the press the last time they talked. Is that water under the bridge now?
It appears to be. This was back on January the 28th when the two leaders had their very first phone call. It was described in leaked documents as very terse. The president expressing displeasure that he was being held to a deal that President Obama cut with Prime Minister Turnbull to take some 1,250 refugees that Australia was holding in offshore detention facilities. The president tweeted out that he thought that that was dumb. There were some fairly heated words apparently exchanged between the two leaders, and then the call ended early. President Trump was described as having hung up on the prime minister, though the prime minister disputes that, though he did tell Australia's version of 60 Minutes that he stood up for himself. Remember the conversation between the U.S. President Billy Bob Thornton and Hugh Grant in Love Actually. Maybe something like that. But tonight they appear to have buried the hatchet. The two of them appeared together.
We have the president coming up to the lectern right now, so we're going to have to let you go. Here's the president of the United States on the USS Intrepid.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great honor. And thank you to my very good friend, Rupert Murdoch. There's only one Rupert that we know. But for helping to keep this history alive, and he's been working on this for a long time. He loves Australia. And for the next generation. And thanks also to the legendary, talented golfer, Greg Norman. I used to think I was a great player, and then I played with Greg one time, and I said, well, I'm not going to play golf for a living. He saved me a lot of time, I'll tell you that. And thank you to everyone here tonight for helping us to honor and remember those very brave souls who answered the call of freedom. Also to Anthony Pratt, who just pledged $2 billion. And that's peanuts for Anthony, if you know Anthony. Come on, Anthony, you can do better than that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Anthony. That's beautiful. It's really a special privilege to be back on the Intrepid and to address both American and Australian heroes. Melania and I are thrilled to be joined by a very, very special Prime Minister and his wonderful wife, Lucy, who I've just gotten to know. And, you know, they said we had a rough phone call. We really didn't have a rough phone call, did we? Everyone's talking about this phone call. The media was saying, what do you think about the phone call? You didn't really hang up. No, we had actually a very nice call, right? Good. Now the record is straight. All of those people back there. Thank goodness. It's true. We had a very nice phone call. A little testy. Got a little bit testy, but that's okay. We've had a very good relationship, and I'm very proud of the relationship. Thank you very much, Malcolm. The Prime Minister and I have just finished a productive discussion about the interests of our two countries. Together, we discussed crucial issues ranging from national security to trade, to immigration and enhanced economic cooperation. We reaffirmed the tremendous friendship between the United States and Australia and the vital importance of our security and our alliance. The armed forces of our two nations are operating side by side almost every day, fighting to defeat ISIS and the scourge of terrorism. And we will eradicate terrorism. To every man and woman who has served America and Australia in uniform, two proud nations salute you, believe me. There is no better place to remember the importance of military readiness than this ship. It was laid down just 1 week before the tragic and the tragedy of Pearl Harbor and helped secure freedom in its hour of need. I was proud to share the news that this week my administration reached a historic deal with Congress to end the devastating cuts to the United States military. I don't know what they were thinking when they started cutting, but we got it all coming back in big league, believe me. It's coming back fast, ordering lots of planes, lots of ships, lots of jobs too, by the way. We will add more than $25 billion for national defense in a short period of time, and we will ensure that our service members have the equipment, tools, training, and resources that they need and that they so richly deserve. But security also requires friends that you can truly count on. That is why I was pleased to meet with Prime Minister Turnbull, and why I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. And we had a great meeting just a little while ago. I want to thank the American-Australian Association for hosting this event, which I've been contributing to, by the way, for years through Rupert. Every year, he'd send me this letter, could you please give money? I say, what do I have to do with that, Rupert? And I just keep sending him money, and now I realize that was money well spent. That's great. Right, Rupert? For years, I've been doing my thing for Rupert. And for its decades of work to strengthen the ties between our two countries. They've done a great job. America and Australia are old friends and really natural partners. And with your help, we will remain so for a very, very long time to come. Our two nations were born as the rebellious children of the same parent. It's a very interesting statement. I've heard that before, too, about people. And for nearly a century, Americans and Australians have fought together, bled together, and died together as brothers and sisters. Since the First World War, when Australians led Americans in the Battle of the Hummel, our brave warriors have fought shoulder to shoulder in every major conflict together. Their righteous cause has always been the same: the safety of our citizens and the survival of our freedom. From the beaches of Normandy, a vicious, vicious fight, to the jungles of Vietnam and the desert landscapes of the Middle East, with lots of progress, believe it or not, after all these years, is being made. Americans have had no better friends than the Australians. I mean that. We are proudly and profoundly grateful for Australia's contributions in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and their help in the fight against terrorism following the terrible attacks of September 11th. On behalf of the United States, I thank the Australian people tonight. Believe me, I have so many friends here from this country, and we love Australia, all of us. We really love Australia. Thank you very much. I know there are many active duty service personnel from both nations with us in the audience, and I want to express our gratitude to each and every one of you. We are privileged to be joined by many amazing veterans from our two countries as well, and from so many different conflicts. There are so many conflicts that we fought on and worked on together, and by the way, in all cases, succeeded on. It's nice to win. It's nice to win. And we've won a lot, haven't we, Mr. Prime Minister? We've won a lot. We're going to keep it going, by the way. You've given your love and loyalty to your nations, and tonight a room of grateful patriots says thank you. We are especially honored by the presence tonight of 7 World War II veterans, and we've been talking about them all night, but I should mention their name once again, perhaps for the final time tonight, or we can keep mentioning them because they're worth it. And their names again: John Hancock, Derek Holyoke, Gordon Johnson, Norm Tame, Wendell Thrasher, Roger Spooner, and Bill White. Great, great people. Great. These men stood at the breach in the battle to save civilization, and their sacrifice kept us free. Exactly 75 years ago this week, these men saw that historic battle with their own eyes. And we've also covered that very, very vicious, violent battle. But this is a little bit of a different description. But the end result was the same. We won. We won. They saw enemy planes flying toward them by the dozen. They saw the flames erupt into the air, and they saw the true cost of war in the faces of the heroes that never returned. On this special gathering, on this special night, we remember the courage of these men and every man, Australian and American, who fought in the Battle of the Coral Sea. The count of the dead goes on, and the number of wounded do not even begin to describe the toughness of the fight and their incredible sacrifice. But perhaps in the story of just one man, we can hope to get a small glimpse of its measure. It is the story of Lieutenant Jack Powers, a Navy flyer. He grew up just miles from here in a modest apartment in Washington Heights, right up the road. He then went on to the United States Naval Academy, incredible place. There, his roommate said of Jack, never trust him to respect conventionalities, because he wasn't a conventional person, to put it mildly. He's a hilarious rebel and his own man. You like him and really like him a lot, but you know what? He's just a different kind of a guy. In other words, he was a New Yorker. By the attack on Pearl Harbor, Jack had already served 6 years in the Navy. In the 6 months that followed, the Allies suffered many defeats and many, many casualties. Japan captured footholds all across the Pacific and now was closing, and really fast, closing in on Australia. In May 1942, the invasion fleet moved on. Port Moresby, the vital base just a few hundred miles from Australian shores. It was there off the coast that American and Australian ships met the enemy in the Coral Sea. On the morning of May 7th, Jack Powers launched his dauntless dive bomber from the depth and deck of the Yorktown. He was some flyer, I can tell you that, some great flyer. Soon, he dived straight at an enemy carrier and dropped his bomb so low, he was almost caught in the blast, and he was badly hurt. But he escaped and the carrier sank. That night on the Yorktown, Jack urged the other pilots to take the same risk. He said, that's the way you do it. That's the way you win. That's the way you sink them. Whatever the cost, even if it costs you your lives, that's the way you sink the ship. The next morning, he pressed his point again. Remember, he said, the folks back home are counting on us. I'm going to get a hit if I have to lay it down right next to that flight deck. In their courage, they turned the tide of the Pacific War. They had tremendous success. They were knocking out ship after ship. That day, Jack flew his plane to another carrier, straight into a hail of oncoming lead and fire, to land a devastating blow on its deck. Seconds later, the colossal blast, the one Jack was talking about and saying we have to take the risk, engulfed his plane, and Jack was gone. He was dead. He was brave, but what a job he did. Sometime before Jack died, he sent a wire home to his father in New York. It read, Dear Dad, 1,000 miles away doesn't make any difference. Your bad son is thinking of you, hoping that he is worthy of being called a chip off the old block. His father was a tough cookie also. Now it is we who are thinking of Jack and all those brave souls who fought alongside of him with that incredible form of attack, and especially those who found their final resting place beneath the waters where they waged that greatest of battles. They lost their lives in the fires of war, but gained immortality through their sacrifice. And now, 75 years later, we hope that we are worthy of their deeds in the beautiful, beautiful Coral Sea. We hope to be worthy of the sacrifices made by every service member who has fought in our name, past and present. The men who fought the Second World War saw terrible things, horrible things, deathly things, but they also witnessed spectacular valor and bravery. And from the wreckage of that horrible war, they rebuilt their nations and launched civilization to new heights. They knew that together, free people can achieve extraordinary things, and that one hero can make all of the difference in the world. In those Pacific waters, we forged iron bonds between our two countries. Few peoples in the world share ties in history, affection, and culture like the Americans and the Australians. Few, believe me. Those ties were sealed with the blood of our fathers and grandfathers. And those same ties are now the priceless heritage we celebrate so beautifully tonight. So with love for our two nations, with pride in our shared history, and with faith in Almighty God, we renew our old friendship and we pledge our lasting partnership in the search for prosperity and everlasting peace. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. I'm honored that you're here. I'm honored that Mrs. Turnbull is here. And I'm honored that everybody in this room is with us to realize what a great, great relationship our two nations have together. God bless you. God bless our fallen heroes. God bless the Australian people. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So that was President Donald Trump on an aircraft carrier over on the Hudson River, delivering remarks commemorating the World War II Battle of Coral Sea with the Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, who he actually said they had a great phone call despite the leaks from the fake news media, and then he takes a shot at the fake news media.
And points out where they were.
Exactly, way in the back. And then touting big league investments in the U.S. military. Very proud of that. And then coming off a big Obamacare repeal win today in the House. KG, what'd you think of Tuxedo Trump?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I thought he was very presidential. I love the relationship that he was fostering with Australia and complimenting them, and also kind of straightening the record out, because a lot of the reports were that this was a testy, relationship between them, and the call didn't go well. But he said, for a second maybe it was there, but overall it went very well. So that was good. You kind of have to take your message, and he has to, directly to the people, so there isn't any miscommunication, because it goes through the decipher of the mainstream media,
right.
And when it's spit out the other end, it's something a little bit too distorted for words. But big win for him today on health care and for the Republicans. But now they've got to, they're at the 90-yard. They got to get 100-yard dash in terms of getting it through with the Senate, which is not going to be easy.
It's only the beginning. Greg, you looked riveted by the play-by-play military history that the president delivered.
I know, it was great. I mean, there are 7 surviving members. There are 4 Australians and 3 Americans. They're all in their mid-90s.
Yeah.
So you know that there are people concerned over how this might affect their commute home because they work in New York, or there's others who are out protesting who are looking at this moment where they're commemorating this battle as an opportunity to rage against Donald Trump. When you think about the fact that these 7 men, and some who traveled up to 28 hours to get there, and what they were fighting for was the ability for these people to actually protest and come out and yell at Donald Trump. It's a great irony, and it should be appreciated when you're thinking about, how do I get home, or is this going to cause me to be late or whatever, that these guys traveled 28 hours to be there. They're all in their mid-90s. Yeah. And it's kind of incredible. It is incredible. Also an incredible alliance between Australia and the United States. There's a lot of intelligence sharing. We need the Australians for anti-terror measures. China acts up. Australia's right there. North Korea is a threat in the Pacific. What'd you take away from the president's speech?
I mean, Australia has been America's ally in every American conflict for the past 70 years. On a side note, if you ever come to New York, the Intrepid is one of my favorite tourist destinations. My grandfather served on it. My brother's a Navy pilot. It holds a great, dear place in my heart. It's beautiful. It's a great piece of sort of American history. The other thing I will say, he did a speech in the Rose Garden with the Air Force this week. He's going to the Intrepid this week. For someone like me who votes 50% on military and foreign policy, this is a president who is no longer apologizing for our military, who's making America first, who isn't leading from behind. As you know, I wasn't always the biggest Donald Trump supporter. He's really won me over with his support for the military, and by the way, quite literally putting his money where his mouth is. And it's great to see him with our allies tonight.
Juan, what did you think of the speech?
Well, I love his history. Obviously, he's not a history buff, as we know from his take on the Civil War and Frederick Douglass.
But
I must say, I love the idea that he says, "Oh, that was a great phone call. It was a peaceful phone call. Wasn't it a great phone call? Absolutely. Yes, there was tension, but we got over that." It's like, oh yeah, we have now rewritten the history of this phone call. It's just delightful. And of course, he's on his way to play golf again. And I guess Greg says, if you're worried about traffic jams, think about the right of protest. You know what? You're going to have a traffic jam because he's on his way out to Bedminster. He's going to spend the weekend there playing golf. The thing about this speech that I like is, you know what? Donald Trump comes in and he is able, like nobody else, to be a salesman and say, this is about something much bigger than me. It's about the American-Australian alliance. I think this is the first time he's realized, as he said, he was sending money, and he said, what do I have to do with Australia? I don't have anything. He didn't understand how important Australia was to America's security.
Giving the President of the United States enough credit, Juan.
No.
Thank you very much. We're going to have more
self-deprecating
from the 5 when we come right back.
Hola, ¿cómo te va? To our Fox fans in Argentina watching on Clarin Multi-Canal Cablevision. You can catch me on Fox Business. If you don't have it, ask your TV provider. And in the meantime, visit foxbusiness.com.
want to get back to being normal again.
Normal isn't possible when this is your daily routine. 11 hours of dialysis every night for this 28-year-old woman in Connecticut who's battling end-stage renal disease.
There are days that I can't get out of bed, to be honest. There are days that it hurts to move too much.
Ashley Norton's kidneys can no longer support her body, and doctors tell her she'll likely spend 5 to 7 years on the national transplant waiting list.
I feel like I'm in limbo at this point. I can't move forward, but I can't go back. So I'm just kind of stuck, hoping that tomorrow will be a better day.
She's doing a little more than hoping. She recently submitted a post to the online classified site Craigslist, asking if anyone could spare a gently used kidney.
I was holding myself back by not putting myself out there. I really have nothing to lose at this point, but I really need a kidney. So if there's a chance that my donor will see it, okay, I'll do it.
A man in New Jersey turned his truck into a rolling advertisement after doctors determined his wife's kidneys were failing.
Being on a transplant list is like a crapshoot.
Joyce Deal gets by on 3 days a week of dialysis, but she'll never get better, we're told, without a transplant.
You really find yourself out who you really are as a person when you go through something like this, and where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And I just pray to God to help me out every day.
Her husband Frank says several folks have called in after seeing the ad, but so far they're still waiting for a match.
Every day to me, it's like I leave for work and I don't know what's going to happen. And so every time I get a new phone call, it's like it makes me give a little bit more hope.
We have now 22 people dying every day, 8,000 people a year, because an organ is not becoming available in time.
Indeed, the gap has dramatically widened between the number of people waiting for organs and those actually donating them. Since 1988, the number of patients on the national waiting list has risen by more than 700%. Over the same period, the number of donors, both living and deceased, is up just 155%. Experts say that's partly due to higher rates of diabetes, the most common cause of kidney failure. But they also point out a lot of donated organs simply can't be used.
We have about 1% of the U.S. population that dies every year. Of that 1%, only 1% of those die in a manner that would allow them to be an organ donor. So we have a very small number of potential donors to begin with.
So even if Ashley Norton can't find her own donor on Craigslist, or if Frank Deal never drives past a match for his wife, both tell us they hope to find donors for someone else. This is, after all, about helping strangers.
If nothing comes out of this other than more people become organ donors or they research how to donate to someone, then I'll be very grateful for that.
Yes, I'm doing this specifically for my wife, but if anybody can be helped by what I'm doing, it makes us feel so much better because karma is a beautiful thing.
In New York, Shepard Smith, Fox News.
The president and congressional Republicans scored a major victory today as the House of Representatives voted to repeal and replace major parts of Obamacare by a vote of 217 to 213. Undoing the Affordable Care Act has been a major goal for Republicans ever since President Obama signed the law over 7 years ago. According to the Fox News Brain Room, there have been over 60 other votes to repeal Obamacare, but with Obama out of the White House and Republicans owning a majority in the Senate, the end of Obamacare is in President Trump's sights.
We're going to get this passed through the Senate. I feel so confident. This is a repeal and a replace of Obamacare. Make no mistake about it. Make no mistake. And I think most importantly, yes, premiums will be coming down. Yes, deductibles will be coming down. But very importantly, it's a great plan. And ultimately, that's what it's all about.
Democrats trashed the bill and said that it would soon become a political liability for the GOP.
This vote will be tattooed to them. As I also said, they will glow in the dark. they were, I don't know, duped into walking the plank to a bill that will not become law.
They're going down to celebrate something that comes way, way, way short of what the president looked the American public in the eye and said he was going to deliver. Insurance for everybody at less cost and higher quality.
Okay, Greg, so obviously the Democrats none too happy with this today.
You know, on average, every day, 6,700 people die in the United States. You can bet the Democrats are going to blame every single one of those on this vote. And nothing will change their minds, conveniently ignoring all the suffering and death created by decades of liberal policies in inner cities, the war on poverty, you name it, they've destroyed lives. But to this bill, this is what you call progress. It was a positive trajectory, and it shows how kind of Trump works, that the first bill didn't fly. So he didn't scrap it. He said, I'm going to try it again. It's a true salesman. You know, he's trying to sell you a car. He wears you down. And so in this case, he wore everybody down. And so people thought, you know, maybe he'll let it go and move on to something else. No. But still, I believe the solution is to get this out of the hands of the bureaucrats. Every time the government gets involved in something this large, it is never the same. It's like if government had invented the wheel, it would have been square and made of snakes.
Oh, my goodness. Alarming and terrifying at the same time. But you bring up a great point, Greg. And
thank you.
Jesse, I'm going to go to you on this, because the president had to use his leadership skills, his art of the deal, to negotiate and be able to pull votes to be able to secure this. He didn't give up on it. And for all the reporting on it, they said, listen, he went in and was dealing with people one-on-one till he could secure it and get them in his pocket.
Yeah, he was on the ropes big time, and we've seen the president on the ropes many times in the past when he was down big in August and then came back to tie it on Election Day, came back big. And then I remember he was down, and then he gave this great press conference and just told everybody they were very fake news. He seems to be able to catapult himself back into contention when everybody thinks he's down, and he did it today. He's a big winner. Obviously, he's going to take this momentum and try to get tax cuts through the summer. Paul Ryan saved his job today. The Freedom Caucus made this bill more conservative, and I think this really unites Republicans going into the summer, which is a good thing. You know, they destroyed Obama's legacy. This is the beginning of that. Goodbye. And, you know, it did some very important things. It gets rid of the individual mandate and all the taxes and the regulations. It does not allow buying insurance across state lines. Maybe they can fit that into the
that's
Senate.
Like phase 2 or
that's phase. Who can? I can't even keep track of.
But it's important to get that.
It's very important to get that, and you know, it takes away the power of the federal government. It makes it state-based, so they have flexibility with Medicare and things like that. So there's a lot of good things in the bill, and they'll probably make it a little bit better in the Senate.
All right, Megan, your reflection.
Yeah, I'm not saying this isn't a win today, because obviously it is. The Freedom Caucus has been validated by the fact that they can bring moderates to the other side. They sort of played a game of chicken with moderates and said, we're not going on this bill. And moderates ended up being the people that President Trump, were able to turn over. This isn't going to be final. This still has to go to the Senate, and I wouldn't take this bill as is, because the same fight we just saw between moderates and members of the Freedom Caucus and more extreme fiscal conservatives, exact same thing is going to happen in the Senate, and it's not going to be a day at the beach. But I look forward to seeing President Trump put pressure on people one way or the other who would get in the way of getting this repealed and replaced, because midterm elections are coming, and if you say, I promised to repeal and replace Obamacare, and boom, I did it, I mean, the elections are going to be a pretty easy slam dunk.
Yeah, and some of these people are playing a little chicken with it, saying, well, if, you need the votes, but you don't have it, then I'll come forward. If not, I may stand back to cover their butt. But he's going to remember who those people are. That's a bad, perilous position to be in. Juan.
You know what? I hope it covers mental illness, because we're seeing a lot of it at the table tonight. A lot of people
Nicely done.
Oh
Come
my
on,
God.
Juan.
This is great. This is a victory for Trump. Like a dose of reality, just, the doctor's prescription. This is a fraud. This is a guy who didn't get anything done, no legislative accomplishment in the first 100 days, desperate for something that he can call a victory. He gets pressure on everybody from the Heritage
Democrats
Foundation
so hysterical
to
today
the
if
Senate,
nothing happens?
all the way to Paul Ryan, and says you must do this. Reince Priebus pushing this like it's his life depending on it.
But
here's the details you have not heard about, America. Uninsured, more uninsured people. Remember, I'm going to give you something that covers everybody. Better?
Those are people that
Guess
don't
what?
want to sign
Hold
up
on.
for insurance.
No,
if you're young and
that's
healthy,
not
you
true.
don't have to buy it because you're not mandated.
Please. You are
to
so
have
full
it.
of. Let me just tell you something.
That's the truth.
What about this? If you're a senior in this country, so many older people voted for President Trump. Guess what? Now you can be charged 5 times more for your medical
What about my
coverage.
home state of
What
Arizona?
about this?
That
What
the
about
premiums are up
Medicare?
over 100%.
What about the seniors that paid 116% more for their premiums in Arizona?
Let me just tell you something. What about Medicare?
Honestly, how dare you? My home state has been hit the hardest by far.
Hospitals are going to pay more for Medicare. What about the poor? Paying more for premiums and deductions.
I want Juan to go to Arizona. No, I want you to go to Arizona and say this.
Resuscitate Juan in a second. Go ahead, Megan.
I want Juan to go to Arizona and talk to people that I know that are paying more than their mortgage for Obamacare premiums, 126%. Promise that they could have insurance anywhere. One insurance company in every county except one in my home state of Arizona. It's a disaster. Why are you freaking out so much? Nothing happened. This isn't a big deal. Why are you freaking out? You're freaking out, and Democrats are freaking out.
It was a lie because
we
like your health care, you can keep it. It's kind of like that.
All right, everybody, deep breath. Everybody think of like a green pasture and frolicking little goats.
Let me tell you something. Don't mess with McCain. I've told you once before. I've told you again. Directly ahead, President Trump signs an executive order protecting religious liberty, and the left is not happy about it. You saw Juan, right? We'll have the details when we come right back.
As the Five previewed yesterday, President Trump signed an executive order today protecting religious liberties for Americans.
We will not allow people of faith to be targeted, bullied, or silenced anymore. And we will never, ever stand for religious discrimination. Never, ever. No American should be forced to choose between the dictates of the federal government and the tenets of their faith. This executive order directs the IRS not to unfairly target churches and religious organizations for political speech.
Strong words from the president, but guess what? Some on the right are criticizing the order for not going far enough. And then, of course, some on the left are upset too. The ACLU saying they're monitoring the implementation of the order, reserving the right to file a lawsuit. Megan, I'm surprised at the reaction from some on the right in the religious community. I was looking at National Review. They said these directives are respectively meaningless, dangerous, and meaningless. I mean, I guess they wanted to drive home the point. Why is the right upset?
I think in cases like Hobby Lobby and Little Sisters of the Poor, it shows that an executive order can only go so far. But, you know, topics like these can be taken to court. It can actually go to the Supreme Court if it would get that far. And in the case of Little Sisters of the Poor, they actually ended up losing. So I think the argument from people that this is their number one issue is that this just doesn't go far enough. Since we tangled a bit in the last segment, I will say one thing that I don't like about this is Republicans were very hard on President Obama for governing by executive order as a whole. And I think we're getting to a place where President Trump is doing a lot of executive orders. And I don't necessarily like the precedent because I like governing by legislation and getting bipartisan support. But for his hardcore supporters on the right, that this is their number one issue, this is a victory for them today.
So, Jesse, a lot of people know about the Johnson Amendment because President Trump spoke so effectively against it during the campaign. That amendment or law basically says that a church cannot become involved in political activity, can't endorse a candidate. But this doesn't undo that.
Or contribute.
I don't know if it completely doesn't undo it. What I think happened here is these people that support Donald Trump on the religious right, they have very noble and genuine feelings about the government's role and how it should not be too intrusive in the church's life. Do I feel that President Trump is the most devout Christian president we've ever had? Absolutely not. I don't want to see the president get bogged down and dragged into these social issue fights on abortion and on gay rights because he's not a traditional Republican politician. He's not an ideologue. He's kind of above. He's kind of, Mike Pence. And what I think happened here is that the people came to Pence and say, hey, Pence, you know, it's a National Prayer Breakfast Day. Let's get the president out there to do something. He does it, signs the executive order. You know, it might get tied up for a while in the courts. Who knows? It's a good thing. We want a president that respects Christianity and religion, but I don't know if, the president's heart's truly in this one. He looks like he's there to create jobs.
I don't think you're giving him enough credit. I think this is something from even conversations I've had with him that he wanted to do, that he said he was committed to do. He's following through on it. So I think he's checked a very important box here. And this is significant because this prevents the IRS from selectively enforcing the Johnson Amendment. And this is a big issue for religious liberty and freedom. Because before it was very arbitrary and capricious in terms of who was being chosen and pinpointed depending on their political ideology.
I don't think there are very many cases of that at all, Kimberly. I can't think of a case where a minister has been prosecuted on this front.
Well, prosecuted, targeted, investigated.
I don't see it.
Well, that's just wrong. That's incorrect.
I think that's right.
Based on the basis of their political speech, and you shouldn't have that.
Well, it's against the law to endorse or contribute from the pulpit to any candidate. But Greg, I was just going to make the point that the polls show, I think it's like 2/3 of Americans think that churches, religious institutions, shouldn't be involved in politics.
This is symbolism and sentiment. It's very confusing to me because I read this. This doesn't do anything. It doesn't repeal or overturn the Johnson Amendment. It doesn't have any effect on regulations on the books. Yeah. A church still cannot support a candidate, and if it does, you lose your tax exempt status. Yeah. So you have a choice.
Well, it targets contraception mandate.
Well, that's not going to have it's not going to have an effect. If you violate a law, you violate a law. The point is this: you either have your tax exempt status and don't talk politics, or you talk politics and you don't have your tax exempt status. It's as clear as that. And remember, he also mentioned imams as well. So remember, it is all religions that are protected. So you have to ask yourself, are there certain practices and certain behavioral prohibitions that you don't like? And that all of a sudden, when you say it's okay for your religious leader to talk about politics, so can they. And if you don't like their politics, and he may not want women to drive. They may want burqas. They may want the things that you don't want. What are you going to do then? You got to keep this stuff separate. That's the point.
Well, but you have to do what he did, and you also then have to let HHS repeal the mandates. That's the best way to do it in terms of
this is symbolic.
Contraception coverage, etc.
Well, you know what? I think this one may end up biting somebody on the keister. Up next, some celebrities are blaming President Trump for their health problems. My man Greg will tell you what that's all about straight ahead.